Hello friends, welcome to Awdhesh Academy. Friends, we are going to start a new chapter and this chapter is about ethical dilemma. This is a very important chapter because in the Civil Services General Studies paper 4, that is Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude, the most important component is the case studies and majority of the case studies deal with ethical dilemma only. What is the meaning of ethical dilemma? How we can resolve the ethical dilemma? This is something which we are going to learn in this chapter. So today we are going to learn about what is ethical dilemma. So let me first define ethical dilemma. An ethical dilemma or ethical paradox is a decision-making problem between two possible moral imperatives, neither of which is unambiguously acceptable or preferable. When we have to choose between good and bad, it is very easy to choose good and leave bad. But what happens when we can choose only one? That means we have to choose good. Both the things are good or both the things are bad. In that situation, how to make a choice? If the choice is between good and bad, it is easy. But if the choice is between two goods or two bads, then we are in dilemma as to what is to be chosen and what is to be discarded. And this is the category which is ethical dilemma or ethical paradox. The second definition of ethical dilemma can be, ethical dilemmas are the situations in which there is a conflict between two or more moral values or principles where you have to choose one of the ethical principles and give up the other. So ethical dilemma is not about choosing the right and wrong. It is about choosing two rights. Both the things are ethical and we do not know which one to choose and which one to discard. Let us understand ethical situation. See, everyday life does not pose such situations in our life. Almost 90% or more than that, such problems can be resolved without getting into any ethical dilemma. Because in majority of the cases, good and bad is clear and we can clearly choose the right thing and discard the wrong one. But there are certain situations where you have to use some principle and choose the right course of action in the case of ethical dilemma. And these are called the ethical situations. So ethical situation involves actions and decisions which are based on moral agent's choice and volition and which significantly affect other individuals. Now there are two important points to be remembered here. First is that it is the choice of the moral agent. That means the person. So two persons will be choosing it in a different manner depending upon their own values. And it's very difficult to say which value is correct. So the same, it's not like mathematics or physics. Every individual will choose according to his ethical principles. The second is that whatever decision he takes will not be considered to be an ethical situation if it does not significantly affect other individuals. So suppose I take a decision which is affecting only me or which is not affecting anybody else, then whether I am doing right thing or wrong thing, it's not going to make a difference. So whatever I am thinking, for example, if that is not going to affect anybody, it cannot be said to be an ethical situation. If I speak something in my room, whether I speak good thing, bad thing, it's not affecting anybody, it's not an ethical situation. I am talking to a friend and we understand each other and what I say is not going to make a difference to him, then again it's not an ethical situation. But when you are doing the same thing, where your words or your actions are going to affect large number of people, then that will become an ethical situation. The third important thing we should know is ethical dimensions. Ethical dimensions are those norms and principles that provide a basic guideline for determining how conflicts in human interest are to be settled or for optimizing mutual benefits of people living together in groups. So one of the very important things we should understand is that if we are facing some ethical dilemma in our life, these are not unique to us. Everybody goes into that. Suppose a government officer join a service and he has to choose between the right action where a threat of life is involved or corruption. Now this is not something which is unique. Every government officer has to go. So these situations are similar, there may be minor variations. So these are the dimensions which are known from time immemorial. From the ancient time to the modern time, people have faced those dilemmas and people have resolved those dilemmas. If you know how to resolve those dilemmas in a way that the society gets the maximum benefit, then that is the right way of tackling the dilemma. Now, let us understand what are the causes of moral dilemma. First is the conflict of ethical principles. In our earlier chapters, we have learned about different ethical principles. For example, we have learned about virtue ethics, where it is said that if your intentions are right and you are a good person, then whatever you do is basically going to be right. It's like a hero in a movie. Whether he do the right thing or commit a crime or take life, he is doing the right thing because he is a good person. Then we have deontology principle, where it is said that ultimately the action should be right and not the consequence. We should focus on the rightness of the action. We should do it as a duty. Then we have teleology principles like utilitarian principle, where the important thing is that what is the consequence of the action. Consequence is most important. Then we have relational ethics, where the relationship matters and your action should depend upon each individual. So many times this conflict is there. So if we take one, the other is violated. And so there is a conflict in the ethical principles and therefore the dilemma comes. The second is the conflict between and means. So we want to achieve good end. We want to do good to the people. But we find that sometimes if we follow the right means, we are unable to achieve the good ends. For example, if you are a police officer and your job is to control crime, then you are in this dilemma. Because you don't have evidence against the criminal. You know who is the criminal, but you don't have evidence against the criminal. And you know that if you arrest him, he will get bail because there will be no witness coming against him. Maybe nobody will file even an FIR against that person. But you can't allow that person to go. So you kill that person or do anything which damages his capability of doing harm. But this action may not be legal. So the question comes, if you are achieving the right end, even by using wrong means, whether it is right or wrong, now this is something, a dilemma. And this dilemma is an eternal dilemma and we are always grappling with this dilemma. So this is the second category, conflict of and means. The third is the conflict of prima facie principles. Now there are certain prima facie principles which we will be dealing in details in the subsequent chapters, which are considered to be sacred in our society. We believe on them. For example, the principle of honesty, the principle of promise keeping. If we are saying something, we should stick to that. Principle of justice, principle of beneficence. All these principles are there and there is a conflict. So if you keep the promise, what happens that you are doing some injustice? What is to be done? Either you break your promise or you do justice. So sometimes such situation comes and then we are in dilemma, which principle is to be accepted and which principle is to be broken. Now we will be learning more about these ethical dilemmas by case studies and by going into depth of each type of dilemma, and we will be able to get some clues as to how to resolve these dilemmas. Because whenever we will be asked questions in our civil services examination, each question will be new. It is unpredictable. But if you understand the fundamental principle, you will have no difficulty in giving a satisfactory reply to these questions. Thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you. Friends, we have earlier learned about ethical dilemmas. Ethical dilemmas comes into the life of every person. Whether he is a normal person doing his routine jobs, farmer, businessman, civil servant, politician, anybody. We all face ethical dilemmas in our life. Today we are going to learn about the methods to resolve these ethical dilemmas. What process should be followed to resolve the ethical dilemmas? And this lecture is particularly designed for the civil servants because this paper is for the civil servants. And so what type of action as a civil servant we should take to resolve these ethical dilemmas? But the lessons here will be valid for any other professional also. So what are the principles of decision making when we are facing ethical dilemmas? The first is that the decisions which are taken by the public servants or the civil servants, that should be based on certain morally justifiable principles. Whatever you decide, it should not be on the basis of whims and fancy, but it should be based on certain principles. That is very, very important. Because a public servant is accountable, you will be transferred, somebody else will come, and then you have to justify why a particular decision has been taken. And that is why your principles must be justifiable. The second is that public servants are accountable to people, politicians, judiciary, and media. And therefore, if somebody asks you why this decision has been taken, you should be able to give proper justification and the rationale behind taking the decision. So this is very, very important for public servant when you are taking a decision in a conflict situation. The public servant can't defend the decision which are not based on any principle. Now let us say on a similar situation you have taken one decision for person X and one decision for person Y. Both persons are having the same situation. In that case, you just cannot justify your decision. Let us say as a customs officer, somebody has imported an item for 100 rupees, another person has imported the same item for 400 rupees, and you have allowed both the consignment to come. Same item. How can you justify? If from one person you have collected, let us say, 10 rupees of duty at the rate of 10%, and from other person you have collected 40 rupees of duty, how can you justify? Therefore, when you are taking a decision, you should be able to justify because it is not your personal fiefdom. You are working as a public servant and you are accountable to the public. Then the ethical decision should follow a process, and that process should be, first you identify the problem and then you end for the resolution of the problem. So let's find out what are the steps a public servant should take before taking a decision. Now we will actually explain this case by help of a case study so that the things become more clear to you. Now the case study is like this. There is a government school which employs contract teachers or Shiksha Mitra. You are a collector of a district and you have been informed that teachers are not teaching well or they are not taking the classes and the students are suffering. The career of students are at stake because of the poor quality of education. Now you have to take certain steps as a district collector to ensure that the quality of education improves and the students get the quality which they deserve to get. Let us now first analyze the problem. The problem is that the teachers are not doing their duty even though they are paid from the exchequer. They are getting their salary and they are not doing their duty. The second issue is that children are deprived of their right to education. We have promised them that we will provide them good quality of education and the children are not getting this good quality of education. Now that is the problem. But when you are a collector, when you are holding a responsible government position, Such type of complaints are numerous in nature. There will be many genuine complaints. There will be many fake complaints. Because the teacher is strict, let us say, the students are not happy. Because the teacher is not allowing copying, the students are not happy, parents are not happy. And therefore, there is a possibility that a complaint is made. So as a responsible government officer, first thing is you must get into the facts. Find out what is the norms of teaching hours. Suppose the norm is for 6 hours and the teacher are teaching 6 hours of classes, it's fine. But if you are teaching less, then they are at fault. Norms for number of teachers. Sometimes what happens that in a school the sanctioned vacancy is say 10 and there are only 2 teachers who are employed there. These chaps are somehow managing to teach. But can they provide the quality education? And if they are not able to provide quality education because there is a huge vacancy, can we blame them? So this question also has to be seen. How many teachers are performing below the norm? Whether everybody is performing below the norm or there is only 1 or 2 persons performing below the norm. Because if everybody is performing below the norm, then it's a systemic problem. But if 1 or 2 are performing below the norm, it is an individual problem. And in both ways, you have to take actions differently. You should also find out whether this fact has been brought to the knowledge of Tehsil level. Because as a district collector, suppose you have 1000 schools. How can you solve the problem of 1000 schools? You have many other issues to tackle. So you should find out whether the problem was first gone to the Tehsil level, and if it has gone to that level, whether they have taken some action or not. If they have not taken some action, whether any action has been taken against those government officers who are supposed to enforce the teaching standards. In the same way, you should also find out how difficult it is to remove the teacher. Like if the teachers are permanent category, it's very difficult to remove. What are the service conditions? And suppose you remove them, how difficult it is to get new teachers. Now, for example, for a particular place, you have already spent a couple of years to get a teacher and you remove him, the education comes to a standstill. So these are the different facts which you should try to find out before you take the decisions. Then find out what are the moral norms, what are the legal and moral angle to it. For example, the legal angle is that there is a lapse of discipline. Discipline is not being followed, teachers are not coming on time, the students are not coming on time. It is a symptom of low moral, and breach of employment contract is also one of the reasons, because the teachers has been asked to teach for a particular hour and they have signed a contract and they are not fulfilling that contractual obligation. Then what is the moral aspect? Moral aspect is that they are failing to meet the obligations of education, and you have to be fair to the children because children deserve education. So that is also something which you have to consider, and you have to also be fair to the teachers because you cannot be totally in favor of the students. You should also listen to the point of view of teachers. So these are the moral aspects of taking the decisions. Now, once you know the facts, once you have analyzed the legal and moral angle, then you should analyze the different type of alternatives which are available to you. For example, can you alter the working hours that will suit the students and the teacher more so that they are more punctual? Can we introduce some sort of quality improvement program for teachers? Because it is quite possible that teachers do not have the latest knowledge or they are not adequately trained. So can we have some sort of quality education program? You can also hold a meeting of teachers and motivate them by telling them the importance of teaching and motivate them to do a national service, and some sort of motivation is required, and that is possible by taking a meeting with the teachers. You can also apprise the teachers of their duties and responsibilities so that they know what is they are supposed to do, and you can also tell them the consequence if they are not following the duties. You can also use the option of transferring the teachers to remote places if that is possible, and you can suspend the teacher if you find that some individual teachers are only breaking the norm. You can even suspend the teacher so that it has an effect on that person and also on the other teachers. You can also consider dismissing the teacher, and you can also consider appointing new teacher in their place. So these are the different options which are available to you. Now, after you have got all the options, the next step is to resolve the problem. It is not sufficient that you only have the option, because it requires considerable courage to follow the right option. So you have to resolve the problem after you are having the option. What are the things you can do? You have to take appropriate action and find the optimum solution of the problem. There will never be a perfect solution of any problem. You cannot expect that the contractual teacher will be able to teach very high standard of teaching, because they are paid very paltry sum of money. So you cannot expect them to get very high standards. But let us try to find out what is the best possible solution in this situation. You have to choose a solution which could be right according to law, and it should maximize the benefit to the society. So you should not do anything which is against the law, or you should also see that whatever you do should not affect the society. If there is one teacher and you remove that teacher, then it is not good for the society, because the students will be not getting even that one teacher. So that may not be the right solution in that situation. And then you can use the different principles like virtue ethics, deontology, utilitarian principles, and you can find out as to what is the best solution possible in the given situation. Now, how do we test whether the decision which has been taken is the right decision? So we can have certain tests which can be used as far as the public servant is concerned, and that can be broadly applicable for all fields of life. First is that it should be based on the fact of the case. It should follow ethical principles. It should be in harmony with the public policy. So if the public policy is to teach, to impart education, then it should not end into a consequence or end into a result where actually teaching is adversely affected. It should not violate the principle of natural justice. That means when you are taking action against somebody, give that person an opportunity to present his case. Listen to his side also. It should not be a one-sided decision. You should strike a balance between adherence to rule and discretion. Sometimes what happens that it may not be possible to work exactly according to the rule. In that situation, if somebody is violating a rule and ultimately fulfilling the purpose, then that should be considered. You have been given adequate discretionary power, use that discretionary power and see that the best interest of the society is served. Your intention should be solve the problem in the best possible manner and not to show your power. And the balance should be maintained between the interest of the individual and the interest of the society. You cannot sacrifice the individual for the society, and you also have to take care of the society. You cannot favor a particular individual and give too much weightage for his individual problem. So these are the tests of a right decision. So all these factors has to be considered when we are taking a decision in a ethical dilemma situation. So I hope by example what we have taken today, you will be able to understand as to how to face an ethical situation and how to take the right decision in the situation. Now the real life situations are not like mathematical problems where there can be one solution, there can be multiple solutions, there can be multiple ways of looking at things and solving the problem. As far as you are able to convincingly follow a particular method and take the right decision, I think you will be appreciated and nobody will question your authenticity of taking the decision. Thank you very much for watching the video. Friends, we have earlier learned about one method for taking ethical decisions. Today we are going to learn another model for taking ethical decisions. This is called Evans and MacMillan model of ethical decision making. So this particular model was developed by Evans and MacMillan, and this basically provides a framework where there are 10 steps to make ethical decision making by efficient and practical manner. Now this particular framework is very much suitable for public servants and the law enforcement officers. Now this particular model is more useful because it is specifically designed for the government officers, civil servants. It basically addresses various issues of law, regulations, policy and procedures and other factors which are quite important for the civil servants. So this is applicable for the civil servants more, and it is particularly useful for us because when we are going to solve the case studies, If we understand this particular model, it will help us in taking the decisions in a very step-to-step manner, in a very proper manner. So friends, let's understand the 10 steps using which we can take ethical decisions in government. So the first is establish the fact. Now, when we are going to take a decision, we should rely on the facts to guard ourselves against misinformation and cognitive biases. Because what happens that many times against the public servant who are honest, upright, there are many malicious complaints, false complaints. Or sometimes, some people have told negative thing about other people. They are deliberately poisoning our mind. Now, in that situation, we have a negative opinion, and when the complaint comes, we tend to take negative view of that particular person. So, you should rely on facts and not on the misinformation and the cognitive biases which has been created because of other people. If suppose the facts are not known to us, then we should conduct thorough investigation so that we can ascertain the facts, and only when we have the facts we should take the decision. We should avoid acting on rumors and gossips by verifying information through factual information and evidence. So whatever information is there, we should try to find out the facts, and only after the facts are known we should take the action. The second step is determine your legal obligation and duties. Friends, the government of India may be one or the government of states may be one, but we as a civil servant have an assigned department and role. So for example, if I am in the tax department, I have to perform one particular type of role. If I am in a police department, my role is different. If I am another department, let us say in forest department, my role will be different. So we should know what are our legal obligations and duties. A civil servant must be sure of their professional and legal obligations. We should not get into the domain of other people. We should avoid venturing into the domain of other government departments. So for example, if you are in the tax department, there can be a case of smuggling, which may be actually dealing with another department, or there can be a simultaneous income tax evasion also. So you should not get into the other department's domain. You should rather focus on your domain. If a part of the work is falling within the domain of some other department, in that situation what happens that we must take the task and we must try to do our work in coordination with other agencies. We should request them that they should join with us, and thereafter we can work together to perform that task. Sometimes what happens that we get the information during the raid, during the investigation. In that situation, we should pass on the information to the concerned department. But we should focus mainly on those areas which are within our domain. The third step is to establish the interested participants who are involved in this particular case. We should ascertain who will be impacted by the course of action. So whenever we are taking any action, its implication has to be properly studied. Now what happens that sometimes we are concerned about the primary participants because they are very easy to identify, their name is there. But the secondary participants are not given due importance. For example, let us say we take action against a company. Now, because of the strict action, the company closes. So the primary loss is to the owner of the company, but secondary loss is to the employees, to the other stakeholders, including the suppliers, recipient of the goods and services and all that. So when we are going to take an action, not only the primary stakeholders, but also the secondary stakeholders should also be identified. These stakeholders, may include the families, friends, employees, which are related somehow to the primary participants. So once you know the impact of the decision which is made on the secondary participants, is particularly important for a decision made with utilitarian purpose. So if suppose you want to see what is going to be the impact of that, then you can see that suppose I take action against one person and it creates unhappiness in 1,000 persons who are impacted by that. Then ultimately as a public servant, our duty is to ensure that maximum number of people get maximum happiness. And so if you know the entire ambit of the impact, all the secondary stakeholders, then you will be able to make a better assessment of the impact of your decision and you will take the better decisions. Fourth is determine the ethical values of each participant. Now here what we do is that we should try to understand the ethical values of the different participants and understand what is truly at stake. Now, for example, a participant in the ethical dilemma may value loyalty as the most important value. Some people, loyalty is the most important thing. Now, another participant may value equality as the more important value. So, for some people, equality, justice is more important than the loyalty. So, there are two people. One is going to value loyalty, other is going to value equality. What you are going to choose? So, you should choose equality as the more important value because loyalty is not equal to equality or justice. So, whenever we have to take the decision, we must see that if we are taking a decision, we should give justice to everyone and we should not be having so much of emphasis on loyalty. Now, when we are going to take decisions, we should consider the normative ethical theories. So, we have learned about different ethical theories, for example, virtue ethics. We have learned about utilitarian principle, deontology principle, relationship ethics. So, all those ethical values which we have learned, all these normative ethical theories which we have learned, we must take into consideration when we are going to take the ethical decision. So, while considering your options, use the normative ethical theories. And we should know our duties that fall outside the law, rules and procedure, because we should try to focus on deontology principle. That means we should try to do the things in accordance with the law. So, if suppose in order to achieve something, we have to go beyond the law, we have to break the law, then try to see that that thing is not done. We should try to act within the purview of law, but within the purview of law, we should try to maximize the happiness of the people. We should also try to assess whether the decisions are rational from another perspective as well. So, it is not only that we see the things from our perspective. For example, if you are a tax commissioner, it is not that you see the things only from the tax department perspective, but also try to see what is logical, what is more rational from the taxpayer's point of view also. So, try to see that a decision which is rational from multiple point of view. We should try to rely on the ethical theory to assist us in articulating the reason behind the option we have chosen. Now, this is the most important thing. Whenever you are taking a particular decision, be very clear about which ethical theory you are going to follow. For example, if you are following the deontology theory, then you must say that this is accordance with the rule. So, whatever is prescribed in the rule, you are going to follow in all cases. It's not that in one case you will follow deontology, in other case you are going to follow utilitarian. Now, suppose you are going to follow utilitarian principle, then you must specify that I am taking this decision because it is going to maximize happiness, it is going to give the maximum public benefit. So, the principle has to be very clear and you should use the same principle in all the cases. So, the sixth step is consider ethically sound options. Now, once you have understood which principles you are going to follow, what is going to be your line of action, thereafter you try to create as many options as possible. Now, along with each option, you have to very critically consider what is going to be the harm and what is going to be the value addition. So, each option should point out what is the benefit and what is the loss. And ultimately, what you have to see is that we should consider the positive and negative aspect of all the decisions and determine the risk and benefit associated with each option. So, suppose you got 5 options, each option you take. In each option, what is the benefit and loss, so the net benefit, and what is the risk involved in that. So, that is the next step which you should consider. After you have taken this step, take the 7th step now, and that is to consider the possible negative and positive outcome of each possible option. So, now you have multiple options. Now, you have find out what is the risk and what is the benefit of each option. Thereafter, what you have to do is that you should try to predict what may otherwise be the unintended consequence of your decision. And you should critically analyze the consequence of your decision on each option and weigh the impact of your decision on the public at large and on the performance of your duties, and then on the basis of that decide which is the best option, and then you take the decision. Now, after that, we will also provide you the step 8 to 10, and these steps 8 to 10 may be based on the answers of the following questions. So, 8th option is like that. Consideration of the press and media. You should consider the impact of your decision on the press and media, because we are living in the democracy, and therefore whatever decision we take, we have to see how the press and media is going to project that decision. Ask this following question: would the action taken be well received if it was on the front page of a newspaper? So suppose you take a decision and it is put up on the front page of the newspaper, whether the public will like it or not. So that will also show as to whether you respect the public sentiment or not. But you should keep in mind that often the right decision may be the least popular in the public opinion. So the meaning here is that, okay, that is a consideration that how the public opinion is going to change or what the public is going to assess. But you should not try to take the decisions which are only popular in nature, because the good decisions are sometimes like a bitter pill which will not be liked by the public. The idea is to balance the public opinion and also the long-term benefit of the decision. And so this is something which you have to consider. Now the ninth step is the consideration of the employer for job-related decision. Now if suppose you are taking a decision which is relating to job, in that situation, what you have to see is that you should consider if the agency or the company you work for will still hire you if it knew you would make this decision. That means imagine that if I take a decision which could harm the company, if I am the tax department, let us say, I take a decision which will reduce the tax for the government. If I am the police department and if I take a decision which is actually going to affect the law and order problem of the department, in that situation, naturally, that particular organization is not going to hire me. So what you have to see is that if this particular decision is relating to job, and if I take this decision, and if suppose my employer knew that I will take a decision, whether that person will still hire me. If the answer is yes, then this should give weight to the decision you are about to take. That basically means is that if I am taking a decision which is in line with the vision of the particular organization, I should take the decision. Now 10th is similar thing, but it is relating to the non-job related decisions. So even if it is not relating to job, suppose you are going to take a decision, in that case you must ask if the agency you would like to work for still hire you if it knew that all the facts surrounding the dilemma and the decision you would make. That means if suppose the agency knows that what type of dilemma is presented, how you have come to this particular conclusion, that means which ethical principle you have adopted. If suppose it knows, in that situation, will it hire? Now, let me just explain it further. Let us say that if I take a decision which is in accordance with the law, that means I am following the deontology principle. But the decision is actually quite unpopular. It makes lots of people unhappy. Then in the political system in which we are working, where the politician's interest is to please the people because they get the vote, naturally they are not going to hire me. In that situation, you should not take that decision. The meaning here is that you should also see that the type of dilemma which you are facing and the type of principle which you are using, that should also align with the principle or ideology with the organization under which you are working. So here if the answer is yes, that means if I am using the right ethical principle to resolve the dilemma, then also we should give the proper weight to that particular decision. That means we should take that decision. Now finally we come to the implementation of the decision. That means you should implement these options after considering step 1 to 7. That means you have to see all the 3 parameters which we talked about, that is from 8 to 10. These steps which we have discussed about, that we should do only after we have considered the step 1 to 7. So that should be followed in the very sequential manner. Also remember that the steps of the decision making which has been suggested in this chapter are not exhaustive and exclusive. That means there can be more steps, and in all cases you don't have to take all the steps which are provided. So you may not need to take all the steps which has been discussed here to take all the decision making. Sometime you have to take less steps, and sometime maybe you have to put some extra steps while taking the decision. So this is not an exhaustive list. That means it does not cover everything. So friends, this is our 10-step process which we have learned, and if we can use these 10 steps, we can really take a better ethical decisions in government or in any organization where we are working. Thank you very much. Friends, we are learning about ethical dilemmas. We are now going to learn about the different causes of ethical dilemmas in detail. The first is the conflict between the ethical principles. In the normal day-to-day life, it is not difficult to follow ethical principles. But sometimes we come across certain situations when we have to compromise on some of our ethical principles because all the options which we have are going to violate at least some ethical principles. So let us understand how that can be resolved and what sort of problems we can face in our life. First, let us understand about what are the different ethical principles which we usually follow. We try to be fair. We follow the ethical principle of fairness, honesty, justice, integrity, truthfulness, generosity, benevolence. All these are basically the principles which we follow. And the root of these principles come from different philosophies which has been given by the Indian and the Western philosophers from time to time. So let us try to understand what are the different philosophies in brief. Even though we have learned that in the earlier chapter, let us refresh our memories and let us understand how to resolve these issues. So first we should know about the normative ethics. We have already done it. But what is normative ethics? It is something which is the study of the ethical action. Now, normative ethics is basically a prescription that when you come across a certain situation, what type of actions you should take, how you should balance different type of ethical situations. Because whatever situations we are coming across or facing in our life, we are not the first person to face those situations. Those situations has existed for all generations, for many peoples, and therefore we have some standard method to solve those problems, and therefore this normative ethics try to prescribe certain methods and certain formula. If we use those, we can resolve those ethical dilemmas. Now, we have earlier learned about couple of normative ethical theories, and these theories can be listed as following, and they're basically broadly 4 theories. The first we call virtue ethics. This ethics is basically promoted by Aristotle. Now, according to Aristotle, if you have all the good qualities, if the person is inherently good, in that situation, whatever action he does will be the right action. That means the action should not be judged, the intention and the person should be the criteria based on which we should decide whether the action is ethical or not. In our own scriptures, for example, Lord Krishna has done many actions where in the strict sense the ethical principles are violated. But we don't call those actions unethical because we know that Lord Krishna has the interest of the ethics, principles, society, nation and the humanity in mind, and therefore because he was Lord, he was God and he was a good person, and therefore whatever he did was the right act. The second principle which is very popular is called deontology, which is based on the Kant's principle and basically the categorical imperative which he has given. And the purpose of this deontology is that the action should be right and it does not matter what is the consequence of that action. Action should be done as a moral duty. For example, you should always speak truth, whether the truth is bitter, whether the truth is going to lead to a wrong consequence or not, that is not your concern. The truth should be spoken as a duty because it is the right thing to do. The third principle we know is teleology. Utilitarian principle is one of the example of teleology. Teleology means the consequence. Just like from a telescope we see something which is far away, then in the same way the teleology principle basically means that what is going to be the outcome of an action. So in this principle, the consequence is most important and the action which leads to maximum happiness to maximum number of people is the right action to be done. The fourth important principle is relationship ethics. In the relationship ethics, the most important point is the empathy and compassion, which are very important for building relationships. We know this principle like Jesus Christ, for example, or Gautam Buddha, or even Mahatma Gandhi. All these people have told us that we should have compassion for everybody, even for enemies. Because only through love and compassion we are connected with each other, and a person who is having the ability to forgive and to love everybody is the person who is doing the right action. So relationship ethics is another branch of normative ethics. So between these four principles there are sometimes conflicts, and that create a situation which is ethical dilemma. Let us now take an example, or let us take a case study of a runway trolley dilemma and understand how we can use these principles. A runway trolley is heading toward the tracks toward 5 workmen who will be killed if the trolley proceed in the present course. You are on a footbridge over the tracks that is in between the approaching trolley and the 5 workmen. Next to you on this footbridge is a stranger who happen to be very large. He is a very large person, very heavy person. If you do nothing, the trolley will proceed, causing the deaths of 5 workmen. The only way to save the lives of these workmen is to push this stranger off the bridge and onto the track below, where his large body will stop the trolley, causing his death. But it will save the life of 5 workmen. Now you are in a moral dilemma. Should you push this man so that he is killed but 5 lives are saved, or should you not do this and allow the 5 men to be killed? So in both the cases there is a consequence. Therefore now you have to make a choice whether you want to save those 5 lives, or you want to do nothing, or you want to throw this man on the track and kill him. So these are the dilemma. So let us now discuss how this dilemma can be resolved. Now suppose you don't act now. In that situation, it is very clear that the 5 innocent workers will be killed. However, you will not be responsible for the action because you are not supposed to throw anybody to save the life of anybody else. However, if you decide to throw that large man on the track and he is killed, you are saving the life of 5 men. However, you may be charged for murder because of your action that person has died. So let's see what is the deontology principle says. In the deontology principle, what is most important is that you should do the right action irrespective of the consequence. And here the choice becomes very clear to us, because throwing that person, innocent person, to the track is a wrong action, and therefore it cannot be taken whatever is the consequence. And therefore it is an illegal and immoral act, and this is not ethically justified. So you should not throw that person on the track. Now we come to the utilitarian principle or a teleology principle. Now, according to the utilitarian principle, you should try to maximize the happiness to maximum number of people. So if you throw this man on the track, the large man on the track, and that man is killed but 5 lives are saved, it may be considered to be a utilitarian act because you are maximizing the happiness. 5 people are happy, only 1 person is dead. So according to utilitarian principle, your act may be justified. However, as we have learned earlier, that utilitarian principle has 2 parts. One is the rule utilitarian, one is the act utilitarian. So according to the act utilitarian, it is justified if you throw a large man on the track so that 5 lives can be saved, because it maximizes the overall happiness of the world. However, the second part of that is rule utilitarian. Now according to the rule utilitarian, you must follow the rules, and the rules has to be such which can be implemented on all the people of the world in all situations. Now definitely you cannot make it a rule that to save somebody's life you throw some innocent person on the track, and therefore if you throw that innocent person on the track, then it is a violation of the rule utilitarian. And therefore, even though utilitarian principle, act utilitarian is satisfied, rule utilitarian is not satisfied. So even according to the utilitarian principle, it is not justified to throw an innocent person on the track. And therefore, you should not do this act, and you should not throw that innocent person on the track. So today we have learned about the different type of conflicts that may come while implementing the ethical principles, and we have also done a case study and learned how we can use these principles in the real life and take a course of action which is ethically correct. Thank you very much for watching the video. Friends, we are learning about ethical dilemmas. Why these ethical dilemmas arise? We have earlier learned that ethical dilemmas arise when there is a conflict in the principles. There are many normative principles, and when they conflict with each other so that we cannot satisfy both the principles or all the principles, then ethical dilemma arises. There is another very important reason why ethical dilemma arises, and that is when there is a conflict between the means and the ends. Friends, we normally do the right thing to achieve the right end or right fruit. The end and means generally do not contradict each other. But in some situation, the end and mean contradict to each other. So if you want to achieve good end, it may not be always possible to follow the right means to achieve the good end. So what should we do? And that creates an ethical dilemma. So let us first read some thoughts of great men, what they have said about the end and mean. Now the first quote comes from Georges Bernanos, a French author and a soldier in the World War I. He said, "The first sign of corruption in a society that is still alive is the end justifies the means." That means in any society, if people start believing that end justifies the means, it is a sign of corruption in the society. For example, in India, we see nowadays incidents of mob lynching, incidents of fake encounters, and there is a widespread support for such incident. In any developed and civilized society, such actions will never be tolerated. We have a law, we have police, we have judiciary. How can we allow the people to take the law in their own hands and punish the people? Even though the criminal should be punished, but they should be punished according to the procedures, according to the law. And if that is not followed, that is the sign of corruption in the society. Let's now read the second quotation. This is by Ursula K. Guin. He is an American author. He said, "The end justifies the means, but what if there never is an end? All we have means." This is a very important thing to know. Actually, there is no end, because what looks end becomes a mean. For example, when you have written your board examination, your end goal was to score good marks in the board examination. But once that board examination was over, there was another thing. You have to write a competition. For competition, there is a requirement of passing that board examination, getting particular marks in the board examination. So the same examination has become a means. Now you have written a competition, you got selected also, you thought this is the end, but actually it is not, because that's again a beginning of your career as a civil servant or as a professional. So whatever is an end becomes a means for something else, and there is no end in the real world. And therefore, if you start thinking about using evil means for achieving good ends, then everything will be justified. Even bad end can be justified, because they will be giving you maybe in future some good end. Now let's understand the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi about end and means. He said, "They say means are after all means. I would say means are after all everything. As the means, so the end. There is no wall of separation between the means and the end. So Mahatma Gandhi was very, very clear that end and means are one and the same thing. You cannot achieve good ends by following evil means. It is just an illusion. And therefore, we should try to achieve the right end by using the right means. In order to follow the right means, we must follow the right procedures to achieve the justice. The justice is not something which is on the whims and fancies of the people. People should be satisfied that yes, justice has been done, and that will come only when the process of justice has been fulfilled. What are the different steps we will learn today? First step is equality of access, impartiality. Second step. Third is transparency. Fourth is efficiency. Fifth is participation. And sixth is right to appeal. These are the process of justice. Now let us understand them in detail. So the first important step is equality to access. That means all affected parties must have equal opportunity to express their case or approach the decision maker. It also means that all the parties must be provided all information. If the decision is to be based on certain information, then that information should not be confidential to the judge. It should be available to everybody, both the parties or all the parties. It also means that the process of decision making, the decision process should be known to all the people. If suppose one party does not know what is the process and he is not able to follow that process, and if he get the disadvantage of that, or if he is not given justice because of that, then that's not fair. So everybody should know what are the different processes for the decision making so that everybody can follow that process and get the justice. And finally, the important thing is that all parties must be given equal opportunity to be heard. You should not, discard anybody. If there are two parties, you should listen both parties. If there are 5 parties, listen 5 parties before passing the judgment. And that is very, very important, because if you don't hear somebody, that person will feel aggrieved and he will feel as if justice is not done to him. So these are the important points. You have to hear all the parties concerned before you pass the judgment, and that is the meaning of equality for justice. The second is the impartiality. Friends, we are all having certain biases. In our personal life, we may be having soft corner for something, maybe for, let us say, a caste or creed or gender or a political affiliation. It's quite possible. However, when you are sitting as a judge, as a public servant, in that situation, you must ensure that you should be impartial. Nobody should be discriminated on the basis of your personal prejudices. And that is the meaning of impartiality, that you should look everybody with the same eye. The third is the transparency. The procedure of justice should be transparent. That means all decisions must be taken after informing all the stakeholders. There should be a transparency. Everybody should know, everybody should be able to present his point of view, and after listening all the point of view only, you should give the judgment. And when you are passing a judgment, it should not be one-line judgment that I have listened to all these parties, this is my judgment. This is not the method. Why you have passed the judgment? What is the reason behind passing the judgment? That reason should also be recorded. That this person has said this person has said this, I have weighed both these things, and thereafter I have to come to the conclusion because of such and such reasons that this is the right course of action. That means the reasons for pronouncing the judgment should also be known. That is very important for transparency. Fourth is efficiency. It is widely said that justice delayed is justice denied. If it takes decades to deliver the justice, it becomes useless. The damage is done. And therefore, it is very important that in all cases, justice should be expedited and it should be done at the fastest pace. Somebody has been convicted for corruption, somebody has been charged for corruption. He has been caught red-handed taking bribe. but you take 2 decades, 20 years to pronounce the judgment. By the time he is in the service, doing all the damages, and then he retires. What is the purpose of such judgment? Many cases what happens that the judgment takes so much of time that the person who is accused of the crime actually dies. In that situation, the judgment becomes totally useless. It has no purpose. And therefore, what is important is that we should see that the justice should be done as quickly as possible. And so efficiency is also very important in the process of justice. The fifth important thing is participation. When we want anything to be done, all the stakeholders should be allowed to participate in the decision making. You should make the draft policies. If the government want to make a rule, let them make a rule, a draft rule, and publish it for the people, so that people can give their comments, their feedback, and after taking all the feedback from all the stakeholders, you basically pass the law. So that will basically satisfy most of the stakeholders, because everybody's point of view has been incorporated in the law. So participation is also very important for the process of justice. Similarly, in this process of justice, there should be a right to appeal also. You see, nobody is God. Nobody knows all the truth. Everybody is biased to some extent. Everybody can commit a mistake. So if you give the right to appeal, there is a possibility that if the mistake has been committed at one stage, it can be corrected at the higher stage, because the appeal will go to a person who has got more maturity, more experience, and more wisdom in the matter. And therefore, in every process of justice, we should ensure that there should be a right to appeal, and you must be able to appeal to a next person, so that one person is not able to decide your fate. So these are the processes which are important. So when we are talking about the end and means, it is not only the end which is important, it is the means or the process or the path which is taken to achieve that end is also important. And the same thing is applicable in the case of police or in the case of any department, because everything to achieve a particular end, there is always a process. How to collect taxes, how to convict a person. A process has been followed, and that process, if it is not followed, then even if you are achieving the right end, this is not the right thing to do. So friends, today we have learned about the importance of means to achieve the right end. We have also learned about the process which should be followed to achieve the justice and to achieve the right end. Thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you. Friends, today we are going to learn a new cause for ethical dilemma. This can be said to be the ethical dilemma of Prima facie principle. Here we are going to learn that we have some Prima facie principle, and when there is a conflict between them, then there is an ethical dilemma. Now, a moral philosopher of 20th century, W.D. Ross, he has traced the moral dilemma due to the conflict of certain Prima facie principles. Now, what are the Prima facie principles? What is the meaning of Prima facie? Prima facie basically means on the first view. When we see something in a cursory way, what is our first impression? So, Prima facie is that. When you have not gone into the depth of the thing, you have not understood the whole thing, then what is the first impression or the first view? That is called Prima facie. So Prima facie principles points to the moral presumption. That is the way we must act in a situation, in a normal situation. That means the Prima facie principle means that in the day-to-day life, what should be our course of action? What should we do? That is what is the moral presumption or the Prima facie principle. Presumption basically means that something is taken to be true unless that is proven otherwise. For example, before the law, everybody is treated to be innocent unless proven by the court as guilty. In the same way, the meaning of the Prima facie principle is that we should follow that principle unless there are very strong reasons not to follow those principles. So the moral presumption we have to understand. Moral presumption means that the moral agent, that a person who is doing the moral act, should act in a particular way under any given situation. So in a given situation, we should follow these principles. That is the meaning of moral presumption. However, we can ignore these presumptions if there are very specific reasons or very strong reasons for not being able to follow those principles. For example, the moral presumption is that we should all speak truth. However, there can be exceptional situations where we can justify speaking lie and we can ignore this fundamental principle. So, Ross has identified 6 prima facie principles. These principles are principle of honesty, principle of promise keeping, principle of non-maleficence, principle of beneficence, principle of autonomy, and principle of equality. So let us understand these different principles. The first prima facie principle is the principle of honesty. That means we should speak truth and we should also expect that others are speaking truth to us. We should not presume that others are lying, neither should we lie in our day-to-day life. It is important because truth builds trust and strengthen the team, and therefore you can do a great teamwork and achieve great results. Truth telling means the exchange of accurate information, and therefore you can take effective action if there is a change of accurate information or exchange of accurate information. No relationship can survive on falsehood. If husband and wife speak falsehood, if the parent and child speak falsehood, if friends speak falsehood, you can very well imagine that these relationships cannot survive. And that is why this principle of honesty is one of the very important prima facie principles. The second important thing is the principle of promise keeping. The meaning is that whenever we make a promise, we should always keep our promises. Whether it is in the official circle, whether in the social way, or whether in the family. Whenever we make a promise, we should always keep the promise because that is very, very important, and that is what we expect from other people also. When somebody is making a promise to us, we presume that that person is going to fulfill his promise, and accordingly we plan our actions. Now, the contract must be honored in letter and spirit. If we have a contract with somebody, whether it is an oral contract or whether it is a written contract, we should try to honor those contracts to best of our ability in letter and spirit. When we promise something to somebody, then he accordingly decides his course of action. Suppose I promise that I am going to give you 10,000 rupees after a month. Maybe you will plan something from that 10,000 rupees. In the last moment, suppose I refuse to give, then your plan are shattered. I promise that I will give you a job. Accordingly, you have resigned from your previous job, and then I say, no, I cannot give you a job. You have become jobless. So remember that when we make a promise, on the basis of our promise, somebody takes an action, and if we break our promise, then that person suffers because of us. And then we lose trust, and people will not believe our promises. The third important principle is the principle of non-maleficence. Non-maleficence basically means that we should not harm other people. Principle of not harming other people. It is expected that as a social creature, as a social animal, we will try to help each other. We should try to do our best to see that other people get benefit and we act as a family. But if that is not possible or that is not possible always, then at least we should make it a principle that we should not harm anybody. Because if people start harming each other, then no society can develop, and internal chaos and internal conflict will cause doom of the society and doom of the country. So harming each other will lead to the destruction of the society and the destruction of the country, and harming cannot be justified except on one ground, that is self-defense. If somebody is hurting you, somebody is going to kill you, somebody is going to do a grievous harm to you, then you can hurt that person, you can harm that person in the self-defense. In other cases, it is not permitted. The fourth principle is the principle of beneficence. Beneficence basically means that the principle of doing good to others. It is not sufficient that you don't harm other people, but you should rather do good to other people. For example, in your family, if you don't shout, if you don't harm to your children, that's not enough. You have to help them. In the same way, in the society, it is important that we should help each other rather than just not harming others, just keeping a distance and not harming. That's not sufficient. We should try to help each other, and that is the principle of beneficence. In the physical domain, if we see, we should try to give food, health, wealth, housing. These are the things which are physical domain. We should try to offer food. We should try to see that other people have good health by giving them medical facilities, or we can give them some wealth if we have surplus, or housing. These are the physical dimensions. And the psychological dimensions of helping other people is that we make other people happy, we should make other people secure, we should respect other people. So in this way, we can help other people, and that is very, very important principle, and that is one of the very important moral principles for all of us. Preventing others from coming to harm is also a form of altruism. That means if somebody is trying to harm somebody, and if you prevent that person in harming that person, that also falls in the category of beneficence. The fifth important principle is the principle of autonomy. As it is said that the man is born free. Everybody wants freedom. Everybody has a right to lead his life in his own way, unless he violates some law, unless he tries to restrict somebody else's freedom. And therefore, freedom is one of the greatest virtue, and it is a fundamental right of every person. And therefore, we should try to see that the people are free to lead their life in their own way, unless they violate the freedom of other people or the law of the land. So, if you are a moral person, then a moral person will try to see that people are able to make their own choices. Whether they are children, the children can choose their way, whether it's husband or wife, whether it's parents, whether it's your subordinates, anybody who is under your control. You should not try to restrict their freedom, but you should try to see that they live their life the way they want to live their life. And therefore, the principle of autonomy is also one of the very important prima facie principles. And the sixth important thing is the principle of equality. You see, all man has born equal, in the sense that they are all children of God, they all have equal rights. But we have created difference. Some people are rich, some people are poor. Now, all the differences cannot be eliminated, but before the law, everybody should be treated equal. So, all the equal people should be treated in the equal manner. That is the meaning of principle of equality. Now, a criminal need not to be treated in the same way as a saint, because they are two different categories. But two criminals must be treated in the same way. Two saints may be treated in the same way. That is the real meaning of principle of equality. And the Kant's dictum that moral rules should be universally applicable is also important, and all the moral rules should be applied universally to everybody. You must treat similarly placed individuals similarly. That is the meaning of equality. All people need not to be treated equally, but all people who are at the similar level should be treated equally. So we should give importance to the equality of the people. So that is also one of the very important fundamental principles. All these 6 principles which has been given by Ross are the fundamental principles which we should try to follow in our day-to-day life in every activity. And it is very much possible that we can follow all these principles in our day-to-day activities. However, there can be sometimes a situation when we have to compromise one principle for the sake of others. For example, we should speak truth, but at the same time, we should also try to save life and not cause harm to somebody. Now, suppose you are lying, or suppose you are speaking truth is going to harm somebody. In that situation, we have to choose the principle of helping other people and not causing harm rather than truth. So sometimes it can be it can be adjusted, or sometimes we have to choose which principle we have to forego. and that depends upon the situation to situation. In each case, it will be different. And when these principles collide with each other, conflict with each other, then that is the case of moral dilemma. Now we will, in the subsequent lectures, learn about a couple of case laws from which we can understand how these principles collide with each other and how we can resolve those dilemmas in the real life. Thank you very much for watching the video.